to Psych 212, Week 7, June 23rd. We are halfway through our semester and just wanted to welcome you to class this evening. So, just wanted to review. Okay, so here is where we are. A picture is worth 1,000 words. And this is saying, wow, halfway through already. I just want to make sure everybody sees this so we're all on the same page. This semester is going by so fast. So, yeah, it is. So the tasks to be completed are the assigned readings for chapter 7, as well as week 7 review of the key terms, our class lecture, and of course, quiz 3 for this week. I just submitted the midterm grades for this class, and on average, you guys are at 89 as a class average, 89%. So that's pretty good going into week 7. Just want to make sure everybody can get in. So with that said, we're going to jump right into chapter 7, expanding social horizons, socio-emotional development in middle childhood. Very long term for saying, here comes puberty. Best way to explain that. So if you have a teenager, I'm preaching to the choir at this point. So what is the system of approach to your parenting? The primary dimensions of parenting, how do they affect your child's development? Determining how siblings get along. How do firstborn, later born children differ? How does divorce and remarriage and blending of families affect children? And what factors lead to children being mistreated, and how does that affect the child? So the first is, of course, families as a system, right? So theorists have proposed that there's a contextual base of a hierarchy, guardian, mother, father, mother system, and the dynamic between the children and the family. So generally, when you think of family, you think maybe of what? And now that's up open to interpretation. Family is about a connectiveness. Some families are born, but most are formed. People become family out of nurture, more so than even nature. Family systems are embedded in the social systems. We talk about immediate family, extended family. That's where we start to understand how people function and where they derive their thoughts, their feelings, their concepts, as well as their language. So, cultural versus neighborhood versus family. So, I use versus instead of and, because now we're going into how we engage with each other in family systems, as well as in neighborhoods, as well as in culture. The immediate family is seen as the contextually, and I have to say this contextually, biological parents and the child. Now, within your neighborhood, outside of this, you have extended family, you have your neighborhood, you have your work family, your religious organizations, and school. And then outside of that is culture. Any questions? Because we're going to get further in depth with this. Okay. So, one thing I would like to do is to discuss parenting styles. Mhm. It's straightforward now. I'm glad you said that now. You'll understand why I keep saying any questions. Yeah. So all of the videos are also on Blackboard and available. If you've seen them, great. If you haven't, here we go. And the reason why I've positioned them in the succession in the slides that we have right now is because we are going to be going through the written, almost as if it's another written assignment. So I want to get into delivering the lecture so that you guys are thinking in terms of, okay, my next paper and the quiz. So this is all beneficial to your quiz 3 if you haven't already taken it. So I'm going to play this video and then we will discuss on parenting style.
Parenting style is highly correlated with child well-being in terms of social and emotional development, school performance, and proneness toward problem behaviors, including substance abuse. Research has identified 4 basic parenting styles: uninvolved, indulgent, authoritarian, and authoritative. Be careful about diagnosing your own parenting style. We parents are figuring it out as we go along too. I'm guilty of all the parenting sins I'm about to describe. These descriptions are intended only to increase awareness so you can be most effective raising your children. Uninvolved parents do not respond to or demand much from their children. Lacking guidance or responsibility, these children learn to fend for themselves and resent attempts by other adults to set limits on them. They begin getting into trouble at school at an early age, perform poorly, have low self-esteem, and experience higher levels of depression and substance abuse later in life. Indulgent parents are highly responsive to the needs of their children, but do not demand much from them. Entitled and demanding, these children get into trouble and perform poorly in school, though they tend to have better social skills and higher self-esteem. Many of the teenagers I treat for substance use disorders report that they had too much money and freedom and nothing to do. Authoritarian parents are highly directive and demanding, but not very responsive to their children. Children of authoritarian parents tend to stay out of trouble and do moderately well in school, but having been treated as though their needs did not matter, their capacity for empathy is impaired and they have poorer social skills. They also have lower self-esteem and suffer higher rates of depression later in life. Authoritative parenting, according to the accumulated data in the field, is associated with the best outcomes. Think of this as the nurturer, consultant, enforcer stance. These parents respond to their children's needs and hold their children to high standards of behavior. They also teach by example, modeling the way mature adults can disagree strongly but remain respectful of each other. Emotional and psychological autonomy are valued. Children are encouraged to develop their own opinions and ideas, even if they are different from the parents' ideas. Limit setting, such as curfews, limits on screen time, is thoughtful and reasonably consistent. But this is not a democracy. The parent retains full veto power. These parents recognize and rely on the power of their own authority as parents.
So we did discuss this last week. We just talked about the types of parenting, even the kind of free range hippie style parenting we have. Now, this goes further in depth because we see how this type of parenting affects kids, how it leads to certain types of engagement in society, how kids are able to respond, especially in middle childhood. There's the part of social autonomy, the teen period. Now we're really seeing that full on teen to adulthood period. We have those teenagers, they're starting to learn how to drive, they're starting to learn about possibly, thinking about being in school past high school, what that looks like, who's going to teach them and show them how to engage with the rest of society when parents are not around. What happens when there are choices to be made? This is also the period where we start to see kids exert behavioral control, psychological control over choices that they have to make, school choices. Did your parents decide on what school you go to, or did you make that choice for yourself? When did you first start to drink or use any substance? Did you first start smoking cigarettes in high school, or was it something that came later in life when you left home? And if so, why? What kept you out of being able to do certain things in the house? I used the example last week of my brother and um, his abilities to escape the house if he wanted to, or how he would be able to escape. You know, what makes you do those things? Is it intuition, or are you allowed? Are you permitted? So this brings us to the second video in Blackboard, Tiger Mom debate. So can anybody tell me, before we even get into this video, has anyone heard of the phenomena of Tiger Mom? Yes. Okay. hmm hmm Well, besides me. So Tiger Mom is actually popular now. Yes, it's about very high expectations, but a, a grip, almost like a grip on your child, on what they do, when they do, how they do it. Everything is structured. I wouldn't say entitled. Actually, it's interesting because some people can say it is entitlement, but it depends on your socioeconomic status. And when I say that, I mean your financial wealth. If your parents have access to excesses that don't usually include, food, clothing, we talked about the sports you do, about being an acrobat or a gymnast, or being able to do all these extracurricular activities that require extracurricular finances, would you be able to do it? Tiger moms can be anything and have any socioeconomic status. It's all about determination. It's all about making sure your kids have that drive. So there's a comparison in parenting techniques, and I want you to watch, and then we'll discuss. So I prepared you last week about what tiger moms generally look like, but I want you to see the comparison. And there is a professor at Yale who's actually under a lot of fire currently. Her name is Amy Chua, Chua. This would be an interesting second paper. This would be an interesting reference for your second written assignment. And she is currently under fire for hosting students at her home. And her husband is purported to be the Harvey Weinstein of the Yale Law Department. Chua, yes. So I'm going to play this video and then we'll discuss.
When Tiger Mom Amy Chua got attacked on all those mommy blogs for her take no prisoners parenting style, her teen daughters were the first to rush to her defense, and that made us want to hear more from the kids that are the subject of all these experiments in parenting and have them weigh in on the big question: is there a right way to raise successful kids? Juju put that question to three highly accomplished teenagers. She's here to tell us what she found, and these kids were raised in very, very different styles.
Very different ways. And I think what the intensity of the Tiger Mom debate showed us was the fact that, understandably, parents are passionate about parenting. Now, parents are arguing and blogging and opining away on what's the best way to raise kids, whether you be hardcore or laissez-faire. But we sat down with the kids themselves, who had some surprising insights.
Three highly successful teens raised in three wildly different ways. What makes them tick? Shani Lee was raised by a Tiger Mom, a straight-A student headed to the Ivy Leagues to study engineering. Columbia's giving her a full scholarship.
Did your mom let you play any sports?
No.
Did she let you have sleepovers?
No. Well, I had one, but that was like in middle school, but it was at our house. When I was younger, she would make me do practice work when I get home. So it actually started when I was 5 years old.
Extra work at 5 years old?
Yeah, kindergarten. I would come home and I would start doing math problems.
Monica Pabin's parents might be called hippie style. Her brother was valedictorian, and she too is a straight-A student who plays 3 sports.
What makes your parents hippie parents?
Well, they let me pretty much do anything I want. Like, if I don't interfere with family time, I can just do whatever I want.
They don't force you to do homework?
No.
In fact, quite the opposite, right?
Yeah, she actually tells me to take a break and play video games.
John Ferrari gets mostly A's and loves computers. His parents are very protective, aka helicopters.
We're referring to your mom as a helicopter mom. Is that fair?
I think it's fair.
How come?
Yeah, she's always hovering over me. She always likes to remind me what to do and tell me what to do. One of the upsides is that since she's always guiding me, I really don't have to do that much on my own.
All 3 feel high expectations from their parents. Child development experts say that's a good thing, as long as there's not too much pressure.
A B was not acceptable.
Not for third or fourth grader, no.
Yeah.
I was so scared when I came home with a B in high school.
What were you afraid of?
I don't know, just like disappointment maybe, or like I probably could have done better maybe, but...
So, Shani talked about the pressure of the B. Your parents don't even ask you about your grades.
They only asked about the 1 C I got in my entire life.
So if your parents aren't helicoptering over you and they're not pushing you, what motivates you?
I don't know, I just like learning, I guess. I mean, why not? Why not get the A?
But where did you get that message?
I have no idea. I think maybe from my friends. I mean, I hang out with all the like smart kids.
Picking the right friends, say parenting experts, is a keystone to a healthy childhood.
John, let's talk about your social life. Do you have a lot of slumber parties at your friend's house?
No, not really.
Why?
I guess my mom really feels that she's very protective, so she doesn't really like me going over other people's house. I have a small group of close friends.
Do you feel like the world's a scary place? If it's a place that you need to be so protected from?
I think so, because every time I go out on my own, I get, scared. I feel very uncomfortable, and I kind of feel that I should, have someone watching me.
It's a classic nature versus nurture debate. How much of parenting is temperament, and how much is actually parenting?
And do you feel like the world is a scary place that you need to be protected from?
Not at all. I feel the exact opposite, actually. I want to explore the world.
Do you see the world as a competitive place?
Yeah. My mom told me, like, okay, no, I'm preparing you. The reason why I'm so strict with academics is because I have to prepare you. You have to do well enough to be able to compete in the global workforce, basically.
You're a teenager. Why are you worried about the global workforce? I was raised as a tiger cub, and I swore I would never raise my kids this way. I hated it. You don't feel that way?
No, not really.
Why?
I think it helped me.
You would push them in the same way that you were pushed?
I would push them academically. Clubs and sports, and they can do whatever they want in that aspect.
No bees.
No B's.
Ouch. You know, I asked each of the kids to grade their parents, and the hippie parent got an enthusiastic A+. The helicopter got an A, and the tiger mom got an A as well, as you could see there. But there are some universal parenting concepts that this brings up, one of which is high expectations, we mentioned in the piece, the value of hard work, and teaching your kids the pleasure of mastering some sort of event through that hard work. But they say avoid humiliation, which is why the tiger mom got all that heat, remember, for calling her kid garbage and being so hard on
She also
them.
made that other important point about how friends and peers can make such a big difference as well.
Absolutely. It will help define who you are by who you hang around with.
Okay, Judy Chang, thanks very much. That was fascinating.
Professor, you're on mute.
So, what grade would your kids give you right now? What grade do you think your kids would give you? For all the parents. Yep. For all the parents, we're asking just parents. Okay. And yes, she did say garbage. So that's why I brought up the tiger mom. I needed 2 weeks to brace you. She did call her child garbage. Actually, it was a lot worse. She had several rants. She said that her performance was trash, that she was garbage, and that she needs to do a lot better in life to succeed. And she's their mother, and she's going to tell them exactly what she thinks because that's what the world is going to think. Nope, it's okay. It's okay, babe. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do you think that's going to work out in life? Because the teenage daughters of Amy, Professor Chua, of I hope I'm saying her name right. They defended her. They defended her. Mm-hmm. How do you think that's going to work out in life? I mean, could they be conditioned? Does this resonate with people? You know, negative reinforcement seems to assist them. Or are they basically future clients and patients of my profession? Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing, parenting styles can differ among culture, but we have to admit that culture also exists within socioeconomic classes. So sometimes the suspension of geographical culture can exist when the financial culture is the same. If you have a culture of my kid is going to be in any school regardless of whatever effort they put into it, like your Lori Laughlin's, your Felicity Hoffman's, where your children don't necessarily deserve because of their own ability, but you are making a way for them to be in these schools, the Varsity Blues scandal, versus you have to work your way in and you have to be twice as good as anybody else because we live in a competitive world. It depends on the community you're in. Some kids now don't even have to want it. Their parents want it for them. Look at the young boy. He was afraid to leave anything. His mother did everything for him. You're absolutely right, Tamir. There are going to accept abusive relationships. Yeah, I feel bad for the boy too. He's afraid of his own shadow. And what would you infer after listening to that boy and how he described his mother? What if you had to describe his mother, how would you describe her? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. His mother, controlling, a perfectionist, yeah. Very dependent on her, yeah. I think mom, anytime you hear that, mom herself has anxiety. It's a combination helicopter, absolutely. It seems codependent, yes. If he grows up, then what else do I have? She could be that mom that's so involved in everything. And the second her kids go off to college, she looks around and sees that maybe her husband isn't where she left him. Mm, I get it. Hmm. He'll be too scared to go to college unless she goes with him. Hmm. Yes, I know we're being sarcastic, but the sad part is there are mothers out there right now, not too far from where any of us are, who would love to or is even trying their best to make sure that their kids have the same sleep time as they do so that they can connect. Hmm. That's exactly what happens. Parents do divorce. There are genetic influences on parenting. Your behavioral genetics carry through a lot longer than certain familial structures that are popular. They used to have Dr. Spock and how you used to raise your kids by, you know, letting them cry themselves to sleep, or the Ferber method, where you have to teach your kids not to not rely on you at such a young age. Remember when we discussed sleeping in the same bed? What are the odds that that mother probably was that parent who said, yeah, maybe it's okay for him to sleep with me till a certain age. Every other word that came out of his mouth said, no, my mom doesn't like this. No, my mom doesn't like that. No, my mom keeps me away. No, my mom does this. What are the odds that he's going to have a successful relationship with whomever? How is he going to relate to anybody else if he's not able to have that level of self-efficacy? One thing I was always told was that the best example of parenting, when you know you're a good parent, is when you can see your children survive and thrive on their own. Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are plenty of parents who do that, and it can be on both ends of the spectrum. You can be over involved or uninvolved, and they both have similar anxieties. That's the catch-22 about this. So on the other end, you may have a person, a man who had no level of engagement. Like we had the hippie child, but she had friends, she had a social circle that she gravitated towards who encouraged her. She was building a family system outside of her family system. That doesn't always happen. Yeah, you do. You want to protect them, but you have to let them go. So lower socioeconomic status can sometimes include limited financial resources, limited um, educational resources, not because you don't have the resources, but the area that you're in does not want to provide those resources that are your right, not privilege, right. And what happens if you work your butt off in this environment and helicopter mom decides, you know what? I have the money and I'm going to pay for you to go to this school, even though you don't deserve to go to this school. Yeah. How do you like that? How do you like that? Parents do have money to burn. So these genetic influences can be generational. They can also be, I mean, their very culture is embedded. There's a sense of if you mess up, then it's a reflection on the entire culture versus it's a reflection on this family. That is the current issue. Think about even COVID. There were tons of parents who, like all parents, relied on school as school. That's where your kid was. You did not require a sitter. You did not require supervision because they were in school. You cannot leave your children at home if the world shuts down. That's what a lot of parents were being told. Did that make them horrible parents because they also had to work at the same time their kids went to school? No. But plenty of parents were made to feel that way because they did not have the resources or the position that allowed them to stay at home while their children were also at home. And they themselves became not only parents, but also midday teachers, because parents are always teachers, but midday teachers. So it's difficult. And parents are always being watched. That's why I said, if your kids had to grade you, what grade do you think you'd get? Parental behavior, it's directly instructional. You are the number one teacher of your child. They observe you, they monitor you, they mimic you, everything. You give them feedback through reinforcement. The first person that is generally mentioned when it comes to, so why are you in counseling, or how did you become this way? My mother, my father, you know, it's such a cliche. It's my mother's fault. It's my father's fault. It's my parents' fault. Why? Because they're the ones you're around the most. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, that shows that it's working. A means all right, and C means continued improvement, meaning that she needs to continue to improve her behavior because she's being disciplined. I mean, I don't think anybody's gonna grade you on discipline the best way. I mean, I think C is a pretty good grade, you know, not too harsh yet. I deserve it, you know. C is a passing grade, right? C is between 73. That's a passing grade in college. There are a lot of C student doctors. So you're doing something right. Can't like punishment too much. because then you get into effectiveness. Some kids are punishment, or should I say physical punishment resistant. Timeout. How many people used timeout or had timeout used on them, and how effective was it to you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, somewhat effective. Effective depends on the kid. Mm. Or unfortunately, were you part of the knockout club where maybe your parent came from a certain school and they would knock you out? Now, how would they knock you out? Well, a pop on the head, what would be considered abusive today would probably be considered part of the knockout club. And we have to address it. Different cultures punish differently. Spankings, temporary removal of certain things, you know, right. Spanking, and here's the thing about spanking. It's seen as ineffective because it's not necessarily seen as all out punishment for the kid, because it's seen as a joy for the parent. So that's where I've had this argument many times, and I was spanked, not frequently, but it happened. And spanking is allowed. And spanking is allowed. There's one state where you're not, well, actually, that's not true anymore. You can spank in every state, but it's the laws, even though every state has their own child and child protective services, the laws generally fall around the verbiage of spanking within the limits of hand. You can't use a tool. Yeah, it's right, Jacqueline. So it's the threat. Wow. Yeah. And every generation seems to be more hands off because, one, there are more services around and kids are more knowledgeable about, well, if you do this to me, I'm going to call these people. And is this something that should be used? Not necessarily. However, sometimes it's right. Sometimes it's normal. It depends where you're from. No one's necessarily thinking, wow, am I going to be live stream spanking my child? Or is this mark going to be represented, in a certain way? Versus, I'll even give it 25 years ago. You really weren't seeing as many cases as you are now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another issue with certain levels of punishment towards the kids, it was always an argument, depending on the marital system in the home, it seemed as an argument in how to discipline, how to agree on disciplining your child. So that led to parental conflict. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It gets normal. It's normalized. It depends on your culture. Is it right? Not necessarily. But once again, if that is culturally what seems to rein people in, it's accepted. So if you are having any marital conflict, it shows up as parents, especially now you see therapy interventions just centered on how to co-parent effectively. If you don't like this person and you've separated from them, but it seems that you decided to have children together, odds are you're gonna have certain issues. Mm-hmm. I understand that, Crystal. Brittany, I'm sorry. Yeah, it depends on which country. So some countries, you said against physical punishment, for voting against physical punishment. Yeah. Some countries do, but you have to look at which ones. So yeah, Asia and Europe may. Some countries do, but then there's some Eastern European countries that are very pro physical engagement. No, I understand. No, that's where I dispute it. Because you can, they're listing, if we were to go to the United Kingdom, sure. United Kingdom would fit in there. But if I were gonna go to Lithuania, maybe. But if I were going to, what's the country? You had Yugoslavia, you had Czech Republic. Yeah, it's a different story because you have ethnic Muslims, you have people of certain sects of different religions and spiritualities who believe that physical punishment is the only way to discipline your child. So it depends on which countries they're referencing. Even, okay, great example. So this is where we have to challenge. It said, Eastern, Europe and Asia, where? So the textbook, yeah, they're referencing some countries, but look at Singapore. Singapore, Southeast Asia. Singapore canes you. They do it publicly. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. So Singapore, they had a American, um, they had a big trial. Was it? Gosh, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but this kid went there, violated their laws, and then wanted to leave the country before they disciplined him. That's like somebody coming to this country, stealing something and not being jailed and being extradited to their home country. No, because America felt that it was, inhumane to beat someone. But guess what? If you go to someone else's country, you violate their laws, you're subject to their punishment. So he was caned with all of the other offenders. You don't get to pick and choose. So yeah. I mean, some European countries are very anti and see it as barbaric. Some Asian countries, barbaric, you can't do that. But, I'm pretty sure of certain sects in certain states, even within India, you'll find that they're voting against physical abuse and punishment. Others, not so much. Mm-hmm. So, how parenting? So, if your marriage, of course, is in disarray, or the relationship between parents is in disarray, such things as unemployment, as well as differences in upbringing can jeopardize the impact and development of the child. There we go. Thanks, Andrew. I couldn't think of his name. Yeah, I think it's on video because America lost that case. Yeah. Do I think that it's irrational to punish someone that way? Yeah. But once again, don't commit a crime and then get mad at the punishment. I'm pretty sure helicopter parents would have swarmed in and got very upset and said, "No, you can't do this to my son." Well, yeah, like any parent, but hmm. So parenting styles can differ with the child's age, their development, and their temperament. If you have a child that continues to run away from home versus a kid who is stealing, the punishment is going to be different. Also depends on what they're stealing, as well as if they're unable to tell the truth, if they have a little bit of issue with being completely honest with you. Certain children require greater control. So how does siblings play a role in this level of formation? Some people say when you're the oldest child, you're the most responsible. Doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. However, sibling relationships are more harmonious in adolescence if they are the same sex, not gender, sex, when parents have a good relationship, and when parents are affectionate, caring, responsive, and basically all over nice to all of their children, not picking favorites. Now, we will discuss only children. So all of these things need to be included because adolescence is usually the time where you start to have some of the biggest arguments, especially if you are closer in age, because there's certain levels of competition. If you are of the same sex, not gender, because sex is the biological, gender is the nurtured. If you have the same sex, and if you are within a certain age range, generally 3 to 7 years apart. 7 is stretching it, but they include 3 to 7. And when I mean they, I mean the authors, 3 to 7. There's more of a likelihood of competition. The closer you are in age, the more likely you are to compete with each other. Now, children who are adopted. There are 2 to 4% of our children who are adopted. However, before we even get into the other areas of conduct, of pre-adoption care, quality, there is something to be said for children who are made aware that they are adopted, and adoption is normalized as early as possible in the process of adoption. There we go. Oh, well, I mean, so isn't that interesting? Both Tamara and Paige reported having sisters that are close in age, and that's interesting. So I'm gonna I'm going to go back to the siblings. So when you are of different sexes, you tend to fight earlier on in childhood. Can anyone tell me why that would be the case, where you're more likely to compete with each other, fight with each other earlier on in childhood versus teenage years? No, no, not you, Paige. Rosie. Mm, mm. Jealousy, feeling left out, hormones, yeah, but it's different treatment, absolutely. Also, when you're younger, there's a lot there's less distinction in sex. So if you are 2 to 3 years apart, let's say you're 2, he's 4, you're 4, he's 2, whatever. There's Even though your parents may dress you differently, just anatomically, you may still be bathing together. You may still be able to sleep in the same bed. So there's less of a chance of feeling that, oh, well, he's really different. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. Yep, we're gonna get into that. Jealousy. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe your cousin felt that you were closer to her. Maybe she resonated with you. We usually fight with people who we feel more of a connection with. Mhm. 10 sisters and 3 brothers. Wow. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. And so as you guys are talking, you see how even where you fall in line, you notice that the younger or the youngest child will get that attention, as well as sometimes trauma builds relationships, which is horrific, especially if you have to count on that person at such a young age as a form of support. And when you build those levels of bond and trust, it's very hard to break, especially when it's because the people who are supposed to be your primary caregivers aren't there to give you that level of comfort and support, and you find it within each other. Mm. And also distance. So I'm noticing not just adopted siblings, not just step siblings, because at certain ages, you don't know. You don't know who's adopted, who's step, and it's all about how the parents engage with these other people, with these other kids. So your parents teach you how to treat everyone else. When you're older, you have more of a say in how you can engage with somebody. But when you're younger, do you really know if your brother who's 3 or 4 years older than you is adopted, or your step sibling? No, you just see them as your brother. Mhm. Age difference matters. Sometimes you find a big age gap in from oldest to youngest. Hmm. Hmm. And some people are closer to their step siblings or their adopted siblings than they are to their blood relatives. Even the impact of connection in and outside of the home. It's all about how it's modeled. So these are all great points. Some people can do it, Arlene. Some people can accept, some people can see you're all siblings, even if there is parental conflict, right? Not only did you step out of our relationship, or you had children outside of our relationship, and I have to deal with the affair, but now I have to deal with the representation of the affair. And how does that affect the child? If that's what happened, that in terms of if you have children outside of a relationship. Sometimes that's how it is. Sometimes it's just, okay, this happened before me and we didn't know, or this happened after and we didn't know. And it's usually the earlier in childhood you're introduced to your siblings, be it adopted, step, half, the more likely you are to have certain relationships where you're able to connect with them. But it also depends on the people who are around you fostering those relationships. So what happens when you're the oldest or the youngest or the middle child? Don't they talk about middle child syndrome? Parents of firstborn children have high expectations, are more affectionate and more strict. How many people feel that's true? Even if your parent isn't the oldest, do you feel that's true, or do you feel that there's an exception? More strict. I will say, just looking at the science and the research, it's showing more and more the impact of the birth order. I was surprised. I was. Mhm. And Crystal, and for all of I believe Crystal, I want to say, I thought was it Juliana? That she was also a single only child. Only children succeed more in school and aren't spoiled brats. Firstborns have higher IQ and are more willing to conform. Now, I would like for them to have more research around this. How many people feel that firstborns have a higher IQ, and not just because they're the firstborn? Well, that is true, Paige. And Tamara, absolutely, that is true. Firstborns are generally held responsible for a lot of the things that the younger ones do. So how many of you are firstborn kids? Because now we hit technicalities, because you may be firstborn for one parent, but maybe a certain number for another. Right here. I don't know about IQ. Maybe it's just the level of expectation. I feel that it's possible the level of expectation is higher for the firstborn because they feel a sense, maybe the parents feel that you are supposed to take care of everybody else who came after. I'm first from my mother. My father had, I have three half siblings, old, and the age difference in my family is from 50, I think, close, I think 50 to 28. So the oldest is 50, the youngest is 28. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'm fourth for my dad, and I'm first for my mom. Do I find myself having a higher IQ than my siblings? I don't know my siblings' IQ. I would say out of the family, I'm the nerd. Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. Yeah, but you know, it's I was always treated like the oldest on both sides. So yeah. Mhm. And that could be the other issue. Who's most educated? Are we confusing education and what type of IQ? Hmm. You know, are we? My mother was like Arlene, nurturing. Like, come on. Well, I mean, it was before we, my parents married, but at the same time, my mother's very welcoming. Right? Hmm. Yeah, that's what you do. So, what happens now when when parents get divorced? Exactly. High IQ does not equate levels of education. Like I said, there's plenty of C student doctors out there. Fortunately for everyone, I was not one of them. Hence why I accept the nerd role in the family. Um, right. Still says MD. True. However, I think if you found out your doctor's grades, you probably would be less likely to go to them, right? Yeah. No one wants a C student doctor operating on them. That'd be interesting if your insurance was rated on their GPA. So now we move to divorce and blended families. Hmm. Well, parents have more affection at times for their oldest because it's their first child. Everything's brand spanking new. You can take several tests. You can take the Myers-Briggs test. That's a form of it, but you can also take several IQ tests. You can take the Wechsler test. You can um, just the test that we reviewed last week. We can you can the Stanford Binet. That's the standard. You can go to their website. You can ask to have a neuropsychological assessment to see not just what your IQ would be, but what areas it ranges in, as well as how you best take in information. So you can contact your primary care physician. You can go through your insurance company. They'll direct you to an assessor in your network. Mhm. So unfortunately, your IQ can go down substantially if your parents are going through divorce and even remarriage because it's a transition. Usually, divorces are not amicable. Parents become children at times when they're going through this process, and kids get stuck in the process. School achievement goes down, their concept changes, even the concept of themselves. The fact that they have this family system, they feel like it's broken, and now they have to spend their time between one parent and another in a different home. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So some kids have this issue where they try their best to try and keep their parents together because they know that their lives are going to be upheaved. Imagine one day parents say, you know what, kids, we're getting a divorce, and this is just clinical, because I know people have gone through divorce, and it's not to guilt them, it's just explaining from the child's perspective. Hey kids, we're going to be separating, and explaining that processing that, okay, I now have to spend my time in this home and this home, and there's a different mentality that can develop. And it depends also on the age. The younger you are when these things happen, the more likely you are to adapt at a faster rate. When kids aren't aware, they don't know necessarily what they're missing if they've never really experienced it. They may see it as normal, which is good. Nope. Oh, no worries. So this is where we are. So now we have to start talking about joint custody. Whenever I'm doing family therapy, it's always first about, this is something that your parents want to do so that they can ensure your level of happiness. Mom and dad don't want to be mad. Mom and dad love you. The part of each other that they love is in you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sometimes this is what happens. It's not anything involving you. When you have these matters, you have to always reaffirm the child, this is not because of you. This is not to make you suffer, even if you are currently having difficulty with this. Some of the worst cases are when a child is awarded sole custody to a parent because there is a parent that is it has a problem. It can be substance, it can be anything. Mhm. 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 Wow. Yeah, 40 years. Good for him. Yeah, that's all you can do. That's all you can do. Children benefit when family members are both there, as long as the family members are healthy. So I do have to point out, I mentioned this earlier on in the semester, you will notice that there are certain biases. It says children benefit when fathers remain involved in parenting. You do realize mothers also may be separated too. So it's not always about the father being away from the home. Fathers are awarded sole custody as well. Hmm. Yep. This year, my parents will be celebrating 40 years together. Well, 40 years married, and yeah, I don't know how many years together, but it it's any relationship is hard. Sometimes the best relationships are the friendships. So now we talk about how divorce influences development. Yeah. Oh. Now we need to see, which initially I did not. So let me preface this by saying the videos that are online right now, every video that you see came with the syllabus, and it's a preset. Oh, congratulations, Jacqueline. I mean, I'm glad to hear all of this. Trust me, it's tough. Um, but the videos that came along with the syllabus and that are posted on Blackbird, I did not put that there. Some of them will be added in, and I'll let you know that I add these in. I preface this because we are about to see, yes, a clip from Dr. Phil of all people. Now, Dr. Phil has been very informative, but there is a salacious component. However, this is an interesting clip that does show how divorce affects children. So it was used. Would this have been my initial suggestion? No. But it actually does prove a good point about emotional insecurity that can come from parental conflicts. So I want you to watch the video and then we will discuss.
Kids have a personal truth. They have what they believe about themselves, and they go to school and compare that to the other kids' social mask. The other kids may be from as volatile a situation as they are, but the other kids wear a social mask, and so your kid is damaged inside, and he compares it to the other kid's social mask and thinks he's lesser than. He has a damaged personal truth. He feels like a second-class citizen. And the problem is you generate the results in life you think you deserve. The fallout from this is really very clear. What they live as a product of this is astounding. The mistakes that people make in divorces that the kids have to live, like every event's a pressure cooker. Everything they go through, it just builds up on them time and time again. What do you think a birthday party is like for them?
We do it also.
Oh, of course you do. What do you think they feel like if it's Christmas time and they go be with one of you versus the other? They feel they're betraying one to be with the other. The biggest, most frequent mistakes in a divorce and remarriage, they're very traditional. The biggest mistakes you can make is sabotage. You use a child as a pawn. You use them to get back at your partner. You use a child for information or to manipulate your ex. You transfer your feelings onto them. You force them to choose sides. Family events become pressure cookers. You use them for companionship. You treat the child as an adult. You become too emotionally needy. Or you overindulge them because you feel guilty. You baby them. Oh, it's okay, baby. That's the last thing they need. I got 2 rules with children. You never, ever burden them with situations they cannot control. And you do not ask them to deal with adult issues. Y'all are violating every single rule. And he's paying the price for it. It's time to stop. It's time to stop. It's time to stop running your own agenda. And if you're in a divorce situation at home, You got to grade your own paper. It's time to start running your own agenda. It's time to start being a fiduciary for your child or your children and put their interest ahead of your own. It's time to stop venting. They have needs, and those needs become exaggerated. That they need to feel acceptance. They need to feel assurance. They need to feel freedom of guilt or blame for the divorce. They need structure. They need a stable parent who has the strength to conduct the business of the family. They just need to let them be kids.
Yep. So see why I this is why they chose. I said, Dr. Phil, because I'm sorry, Dr. Phil, when you use it in academia, you're like, wait a minute, we're talking about his earlier papers, right? We're not talking about his television show. Nope, makes perfect sense. Yep. I am currently working on a case study with a colleague regarding parenting, effective parenting, and how the use of social media now between divorced parents, that it's like the new form of manipulation. So we had a parent who signed up for the study, signed off on the waiver. This is one of our papers that we're looking to publish. And the parent in the last week decided that they were going to lay on the ground outside of their child's bedroom. They're a divorced couple. But the daughter is living with the father because the mother is expressing and exhibiting borderline personality disorder traits. She yells at the child, but then can't confront the father, but then tries to go through her child. The teenage daughter said, I can't be with you. If I have to live with you, I'll kill myself. So the mom, instead of giving her space and understanding, yes, it's her mother, she loves her, but instead of talking to her, now she's talking to Facebook and saying, living without my daughter is torturous and treacherous, here crying, having the migraine, wondering when my baby will come back home, and she posts it. So you need to tell me, how are you going to get your child back home if you post on Facebook that your daughter has abandoned you and you're lying outside of her bedroom? You took a picture of yourself lying on the floor outside of your bedroom like this. Yep. Rosie, yep. Sorry. Paige, same here. How is that effective? So part of the study is that we pick the parent. Well, we do family therapy, but we actually, part of the study is, we switch off between the two. So I get to now counsel the mom. So I'm going to be doing that in about 4 weeks from today. You know, the clinical side of me is very disturbed by all of this. We made sure that the child is safe. She's in a good place. She's safe. But the personal side of me cannot wait to get my hands on this woman in 4 weeks, because she likes when you talk to her straightforward. She's like, her big thing is, what is it? No chaser. Oh, it already is proven to. She's not going to have a healthy relationship, but she has an individual therapist, but I get to have one-on-one with her as a family therapist. She likes Right. She likes, I like it with no chaser. So once again, the clinical side of me thinking, doing everything methodically, we need to make sure we have appropriate interventions. However, the personal side of me, after speaking with her daughter today, I'm glad we have 4 weeks because I am also human too. And there is no excuse for that behavior. I want to make sure I reach out to her individual therapist, that she's aware of this, but she needs to be made aware that there's a level of desperation and attention seeking behavior that you're exhibiting that is going to continue to drive your daughter away. The one thing teenagers generally don't like is when somebody, especially their parents, embarrass them. It's one thing to do it in public, it's another thing to do it online. So these type of engagements, whether you're divorced, you're struggling between custody, having people who are unhealthy to begin with. So unhealthy parents are generally unhealthy people. It's very difficult to have a proactive relationship with an unhealthy person, let alone them being in a certain role. Just because you're a parent does not absolve you from having mistakes. In fact, that makes you have even more mistakes. If you have these reactions, if you have these outbursts and you're an adult, my favorite saying is, you ever heard of a person having a temper tantrum, an adult? You know what they're called? If adult has a temper tantrum, they're called impatient or they're called a prisoner. Because as an adult, you don't get to have those things. As a parent, you don't get to have that. You are a role model. In step families and blended families, adopted families, it really doesn't matter. You can feel like one family. You don't have to note that this person is not your biological child. You just accept them. The more you're able to accept someone as a person and as family, the less likely they are to have any issues. Well, are you hiding the truth from the child? Or are you hiding? It depends on why you're hiding. Let me put it that way. Why are you hiding the truth from the child? It depends because it demonizes what adopted is. Yes, because it makes it seem like the truth is a bad thing. If you're adopted, it's about, we were lucky enough to have you, to be blessed with you, whether you're, it's not a religious thing, a spiritual thing. We are lucky enough for you to come into our lives. Yeah, that's a problem. Why would, because what secret are you holding? What effects will it have on the child? Right, it's their child. Right, but it's also about what, and that's the thing about blended families and even just these relationships, period. What secret are you trying to keep? Does it make you look bad? Because it's not the kid's fault that they're here. It's not, and if you see it as a fault, is it an adoption issue? If you're adopted, there's no demonization in being adopted. Mm. Well, what would that do to the child? I mean, if the 13-year-old or the oldest only a half child, what would that do to the children? Would they look at that person differently? What is the, if they're adopted or they're a half sibling? And you find this more in excuse me, in siblings that are half versus adopted. I think that we've come to the agreement that adoption isn't it never was. It's not something that is taboo, and it shouldn't be. Why would they treat each other differently? It's all about the parents. If the parents believe, it's like that kid who's afraid of everything, the young boy that we saw in the video. If the parents believe this, they're putting their own beliefs on these kids. The same way how kids accept every and anything. We live in a society, you're adopted, okay, you're this, okay, and this is awesome. Why would the kids, it's the parents, from what you're telling me, it sounds like the parents are ashamed of how this kid got to, how there's a half situation. Because I don't hear adoption, I hear half. So what are they really hiding? Are they ashamed that somebody stepped out, somebody did this? It seems like it's their shame versus the kids. Oh, well, he's 18 and he's 13, so that's, or 18 and 13, 14, 18, that's 4 years. So I would sit there in therapy, if this were a therapy session and we're dealing with family therapy, I would say, so what's the problem? What is the problem? Because it doesn't sound like it's the kids' issue. The kids, if they, it's the oldest. I mean, leaving that up to the oldest, is that fair? No. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Oh no, they have the oldest line. That's the problem, because it's not necessarily going to be about the other. It's not going to be about the parentage. It's going to be about the line. So now your siblings are not going to be able to trust. You're creating a situation where there needs to be none. So now you're going to create an issue where the oldest is lying for you. Is he lying? He's not lying for himself. He's lying or herself. He's lying for the parents. Yeah, betrayal and lies, and it's unnecessary. Well, this falls in line with the last video. It's all about what you're doing. It's a form of manipulation. So you did something that you're not proud of. And I got to tell you, as the kid, I would feel mad. I would be upset because now you're making me seem like I'm a crime. Now you're making me seem like I'm a crime. I shouldn't lie about this. Yeah, this is unnecessary. But once again, it's one of these days, what's going to end up happening is, oh, wow. Yeah, this is unnecessary. Who are we protecting with this, with all of this? Because what happens when those kids get into a room, and this is the best part, what happens if they already know? And they're just listening to all these lies. They're like, we've been just watching you lie to us. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they could. That's a good point. What happens if there's a medical necessity and that sibling is the one that you think you can count on, and it turns out they're not, or worse, they don't know? These things come up, but it's unnecessary. What it boils down to is someone is guarding a secret that doesn't need to be a secret. They're guarding their own shame and guilt. And whenever there's a child produced out of this, it's not necessary. And this goes right into child maltreatment. Absolutely. It can cause psychological issues. Mhm. It can. Because the issue is, why are you hiding my parentage? It's hard for people involved, but I mean, this isn't something you're doing. It's whoever is, it's more of what are you looking to hide from this? And how long do you think it's gonna last? Yeah, it could be shame. I mean, it's also, we're going back to culture. Yeah, it could be shame of what happened, but at the same time, it just seems so unnecessary. It's creating more issues where there really shouldn't be. In terms of adoption or half parentage, no, you said half siblinghood, right? It's not, they're saying it's not your place to get involved. I would, you know what? You're absolutely right. Cheyenne, stay out of it. You know why? Because this is something that is probably not going to be resolved. It was happening before you. It's not going to be resolved until it gets really bad. Right. It's these things, if someone is willing to go to those lengths, it's not going to end well. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as child, we talk about sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect, but there's the point of psychological abuse where I think is underrated. The percentage should be included in all of this because these are all forms of psychological abuse. And that strains every relationship. How is it possible to have any type of effective relationship to build in a positive way when you are asking someone to, like you said, the child is now responsible for lying as well to their siblings? I mean, there's no perfect age or perfect time to make this declaration, but the longer it goes on, the more offended those kids will be if they don't already know. Maybe the parent doesn't want to lose control or the trust of the kids, but it's one thing to lose control and trust of your kids when you're in the same house. Yeah. But it's another thing to lose trust and control of your children when they are full grown adults, because then they can really disappear. Yeah, you lose them. These things can really affect you. But this could actually end up great for the siblings, but horrible for the parents. Because the siblings, that 18-year-old can say, dad or mom told me to lie to you. I'm so sorry. I wanted to say it. I felt horrible. And they could process this together. They could, and the siblings would be like, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I'm sorry, I'm so offended that you lied to me. And they could process that and go along as a family. However, What is your relationship going to be like with your mother? Terrible. Yeah, yeah, you just have to step away. I mean, and this, unfortunately, you went through this, but the sad part is this happens so often. This happens a lot, a lot. This level of disruption of abuse, like you said, finding out parentage, finding out you may have half siblings, the level of stability in the family system is disturbed. It's truly disturbed. And how do you rectify that? Mhm. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. The problem is it, it's hard because it doesn't have to be this way, but it depends on. Well, here's the thing about the intentions of the parents. Who are they protecting? I have no. I'm Switzerland in this. There's no, oh, I side with these people because I always do. No, who, if you, this is objective, we're all clinically looking at the situation Cheyenne's presented. Who would the parents be protecting in this matter? How could this damage those 13 and 14-year-olds? Yeah, but my question is, how do you know if an intention is pure? See, that I can't really say, like, oh, I did. It's not like they're not telling the children that their father or this person's father, who is active apparently in this kid's life, what would that do to the family? I mean, okay, so what does that mean? Is that an issue of perception that the mother does not want the kids to have? What obviously the parents are separated if there's another blended family. It's more it's more of who are you protecting with your pure intentions? Exactly. What is the true purpose of withholding this information from the children? What are you getting out of it? Okay, so the stepfather came into life when he was 3. Okay, so the others are more years later. It's it depends on the cultural. It depends on what you consider a stable family unit. What would that do? I mean, it doesn't seem like anything salacious is happening. So why is that an issue? Is bio mom perpetuating a sense of you need to only be with one man? You need to have this? Is what's happening? This is actually a case study in several cultures. Hmm. Wow. And that's the hard part. Parenting is a moment by moment thing, right? That's tough, Jacqueline. Will they accept him any less because he is, his father is this and this? And I mean, just it's once again, I understand, it's in that regard, kids, they interpret things they're very black and white, right? I see this, I understand this, I feel like something else is there, but I see this and dad's not here, I did something wrong. Dad has this big, hmm, hmm, yeah. And that's one of the issues because that could be seen as a form of punishment. You thought you did something. So here's a good question for you for the class. What would happen if, Jacqueline, if you did not later in life find out that's why that was occurring, why your father was leaving? That could have affected you more and more as an adult. And I thank you guys for being open about these things. Mm, exactly. Mm, yeah, because kids don't come, the whole thing, kids don't come with manuals. Yeah, yeah, good. It's tough. Yeah. And here, that's why it's so important to be as open and honest about certain things. And parents, like we said, they're the role models, they're the teachers, they're the superheroes. You want to make sure that you're able to have this level of open engagement with your children, but you also want to make sure that you're allowing your child to be a child. It's a constant tightrope being a parent. You can't give too much, but you got to give just enough. How would you tell your child, okay, I'm dealing with an addiction without them worrying about whether or not you're using so much and taking them out of their childhood and having a carefree existence, but then making sure that they learn how to care about certain things and be cautious about certain things one after another. And that's kind of the constant conversation. Yeah, that's optimal. But the problem is it is it always practical? Because the truth is parents cycle through at least 4 out of 5 of those parenting styles within any given year. Mm, mhm. Yeah. You want them to be knowledgeable, but to also realize that they still have a lot to learn. You want them to be able to make sure that they're conscientious, but at the same time, understand it's younger and younger. So when we show that level of firm discipline, it's not permissive.
Our first guest this morning has some great insight on the discipline dilemma. She's a nationally acclaimed author and has written more than a dozen books on parenting and discipline.
And we are truly pleased to welcome author Jane Nelson. Jane, I got to tell you, as I was talking to some of those women, I fall in the same thing. Your kids do something, you say, I told you not to eat chocolate pudding on the white upholstered chair, and the discipline automatically becomes a punishment. Is that the first mistake that parents make?
I believe so. Thinking that discipline and punishment are synonymous, and I don't believe they are. I think that punishment is designed to make children pay for what they've done. And as the last mother in that little vignette said, that really positive discipline is designed to help children learn from their mistakes and to learn more cooperative behavior.
I know you're big on examples, Jane. What would be an example to kind of illustrate this point that discipline does not necessarily mean punishment?
Well, for example, suppose your child loses their baseball mitt. What do most parents do? They start with a lecture. How many times have I told you to be more responsible? If you take care of it, this wouldn't happen. I can't believe you would do this. And I'll tell you something, I'm not going to buy you another one. And then it's sort of part of what I call the bail them out, the ball them out, and then bail them out syndrome, because 10 minutes later they're in the car driving to get a new mitt. The mother's still going with the mouth, well, this is the last time I'll buy you one. I'm not going to do this again. If you can't learn to be more responsible. And what does the child learn? That all I have to do is tune out the lectures, because they do. If you look at their eyes, they're just not listening. And then, because they know their parents will take care of it. What positive discipline would look like is first empathize with them. Gee, that must feel so bad that you lost it. You might have to miss the game. I'm so sorry. And when you're calmed down, we'll talk about focusing on solutions. That's when we want teaching children these valuable life skills. What could you do to earn more money to buy another one? I'll support you and I'll help you, but I won't do it for you.
So looking for the answers, looking for the solution.
Exactly. And you know, when we say no punishment, often people think, well, does that mean you're going to be permissive? And that's not healthy for children. So no, it's not being permissive.
Another common parenting mistake you say is that parents tend to rescue the child. What do you mean by that?
Well, we don't want to let children have their feelings. We don't want them to be upset. We don't want to hurt them. And yet with our lectures, we often upset them and hurt them. But for example, the example, when children are having a temper tantrum because they want a toy, what do most parents do? They first try and talk them out of it, but then they eventually give in so that their poor little darling won't be upset. And when we do that, children don't learn that they can develop their disappointment muscles, that they can survive the ups and downs of life, and that they can feel more capable because they have done that. So in that example, what I would suggest to parents do is that they just kindly and firmly take the child out, sit in the car in a few minutes and say, let me know when you're ready to try again. Because children of that age learn more from action than from words.
You talk about many mistakes that parents make, and I'm like guilty on every one of your counts. For example, a punitive timeout. Is that a mistake that parents shouldn't be giving timeouts like that?
Absolutely. And see, I think that the most popular discipline methods today are punishment, whether it's lectures or spanking or withdrawal of privileges or timeout. And timeout usually looks like this. You go to your room and you think about what you did, which is the silliest thing we can say, because what are children thinking about? Not what they did. They're not sitting in there thinking, oh, this is so helpful. I'm so glad that my parents have sent me in here because I'm going to learn to be. No, they're thinking about either how to not get caught next time, how to get even, or even worse, they might be thinking I'm a bad person. And so what I suggest is that it's really a good idea for children to learn to calm down until they can engage. You know, they go into that fight or flight response. We all do when we're upset. And so we need a cooling off period till we feel better. We can engage the rational brain again. So I suggest that parents get their children to create a positive timeout, where something that might have cushions, books, soft music, and they can choose, would it help you to go to your feel-good place? Let them name it something else, like space, or my granddaughter named hers Sparkle. Would it help you to go to Sparkle for a while? And if they say no, the parent can say, would you like me to go with you? Why not? They probably need it just as much. Because, see, punishment is based on the idea that in order to make children do better, first we have to make them feel worse. Really a silly idea. Because the truth is that children do better when they feel better. Now, you might want to follow up with going through what happened, what do you think caused it to happen, how do you feel about it, what ideas do you have to solve the problem.
So when we send our kids to the naughty mat or the naughty step, that is not only the wrong thing to do, that's the wrong thing to call it, isn't it?
Absolutely, because it's teaching children doubt,
positive discipline,
doubt and shame.
Yeah.
But we're still talking about a step back from the situation and giving children time to calm down.
Yes, but first of all, I say if they're not old enough to help create it, they're not old enough to use it, because people who use negative timeout with young children don't understand developmental process, and that children at that age can't really understand cause and effect. And if they're not old enough to choose it, notice I said, would it help you to go? Because knowing that this is a life skill, to learn to calm down and take time out, wouldn't that be a beautiful life skill for children to learn?
It really would. It really would. Interesting insight there, Jane. Your next parenting mistake that you suggest, which I think a lot of parents could relate to, is lectures and threats.
Oh, yes. In fact, we lecture, and we often, children learn that we don't mean what we say, and we don't follow through and do what we say we're going to do. And one of my favorite examples of that is a lot of parents have problems with kids who fight in the back seat of the car. And what they do is they lecture. Now, this is dangerous. You kids quit fighting. If you don't quit fighting, we're not going to, they lecture, threaten, and they never follow through. And so what I suggest is that you let your kids know in advance, before you even get in the car, if you guys fight, I will just pull over to the side of the road, and I will read a book, and you can let me know when you're ready. And then you say, now, what is your understanding of what I'm going to do? And they repeat back to you, both of them, you're going to pull over. And when will I know you're ready to start again? They both have to say, when we both tell you we're ready. And then you do it. The minute they start fighting, you just pull over, you start to read a book, you do not say a word. That's a key thing. Because pretty soon, when you argue, somebody said, I argue with my children. They don't argue unless they've got somebody to argue with. And when you argue with your children, they're smarter than you are. They can out-argue you. They win every time. So if you just read your book and have a good book, hope they'll fight so that you can stop and read your book. And pretty soon they're going to get bored. They're going to say, come on, let's go. And even if they try and say, talk you out of it, just sit and listen, because they know what you said. You don't give warnings. That's assuming they're stupid. They didn't hear what you said. And you had them repeat it back so you know. Pretty soon they'll say, okay, we're ready. And then you say, thank you, I really appreciate your cooperation.
And if nothing else, be reading the car manual. Anything, just to have an excuse to read something to let them know.
Follow through with it,
yeah,
like you
that's
said.
Follow
to
through.
Sure.
To mean what you say and say what you mean is just so important, because kids trust that. And hundreds of parents have tried this, and they say it usually takes 3 times. And then the kids know if you say it, you mean it, and if you mean it, you're going to follow through.
Such great insight, Jane. Thank you so much for sharing those thoughts with us. You've written many books, many books, 18 books.
So her book is called Positive Discipline, and I agree with about 90% of what she said. Now, I agree once again, 90% of what she said, it's more of the asking permission in order to deliver consequences, because there's punishment, but there's also consequences. A lot of what she said does work, but the issue is, one, when the kids get upset, what are the odds that you are in a calm position that she's in? Very limited, because you're also human. So what she described is what we call behavior modification. It's a therapeutic intervention that we use to help people address their behavioral addictions, their maladaptive behavioral addictions, meaning negative behavioral addictions. When your kids are revved up, you are revved up too. If your kids are on 10, you're going to be on 15, and your head is straight for 20 without any stop. And yes, you cannot argue a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum. What you can do is tower over them and give them that presence of domination, right? Which we think all parents should have in general. And she's right, 3 times. I remember, if you have a mother who you're like, wait, she's got 3 mommies in her. Have you ever been in a department store or a grocery store and you see a kid going, mommy, mommy, mommy? You're like, okay, I wonder how many mommies she has in her before she pops him or karate chops him in the neck or does something and passes out. Next thing you know, his little legs are swinging in the air and she just leaves the carriage and she walks outside of the supermarket. Now, before I became a therapist, because now if I see that I'm a mandated reporter, I have to report it. I'm not looking anymore. Sorry, I'm not. But when I was a teenager, I'm like, oh no, come on, kid. Leave her alone. Leave her alone. Don't do it. But parents, it's hard. It's hard to have that level of engagement, that interaction with your child and be at a calm state. So when you start to tell your kids, okay, I'm just gonna just wait till you guys finish. I'm gonna wait till you finish. Are we done? Are we, can I go? Are we done? Doing what you're supposed to do. Exactly. I agree with that. It's more of the asking your child for permission to then proceed. And it depends on the tone and delivery, because some kids don't get that. They only get the action. And that's, like I said, I agree with 90% of what she's doing. It's more of, where is the parent at that time in terms of emotion? The parent themselves may be exhausted. What are the odds that you can pull over every time they have this reaction, or they're fighting in the backseat of the car because maybe you need to get somewhere at a certain time? So it's moment by moment. So like all parents, resiliency is synonymous. You're a good parent, you have a lot of resiliency. You have to just buffer. And that's the child too. The better you are to handle stressful situations, the better your child is able to handle stressful situations. Because we like to teach our kids things that we know. I go back to that child in the first video, or I'm sorry, the second video, the Tiger Mom video, where he says, yeah, my mom gets nervous about things. So she's anxious. She's unable to cope with what she can't control in that moment. Now you're creating a helpless person because you have so much control. You need control over everything. Yeah, it's reflected in him. So preventing abuse and maltreatment. We have so many forms of alerts. Amber Alert, which is great. You will see it on the highway. You will get a text. You will be able to look up in your neighborhood who is the latest pedophile that's moved in. These are all things that we have to work on. Yep. Yeah. When your 2-year-old just has a moment. Yeah. Exactly, Rosie. And Chris, yep. Krista, think about it. Some parents, they're like, okay, I'll be okay. Like you said, if you're in public and your child starts to have a reality television moment and starts to have a complete temper tantrum spasm, you know, other than mimicking your child's behavior in public, you have to breathe through it. In that moment, are you going to say, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you over here, and until you're happy and you feel comfortable, we're not going to do this. What can you do to that child in that moment? It's moment by moment, right? We just try our best not to hurt our children. Can you talk to a 2-year-old when they're having a spasm? No. So we try our best to prevent abuse, especially in that situation. You're like, okay, what am I going to do? I'm not, I can't strangle you. We're in public. I can't do this. We're in public. I can't do this. We're in private. I can't, what, I'm just going to have to let you have this moment. That's all you can do. Positive parenting. Sometimes it's so stressful because they're in distress. You're in distress because you see your kid stressed out. Once again, it's hard. So with that, we go to friend circles. Making sure our kids have that social circle that if we can't reach them, their friends are like, you know what, maybe that's not great. Best thing about being a teenager, fear of humiliation. Very easy to humiliate your teenager. Unfortunately, there's also the loyalty and intimacy pact. Groups, especially cliques, can be really hard to break, can be hard to penetrate, especially when they have a negative hold. When you're in preschool, you're a toddler, you're tweens, you start to see more of a connection. But adolescence is where you really start to see that group affiliation, start to assimilate to a group norm. Friendships are same age, generally same sex, same gender. Now, with exposure to the world, it can be anything. They share a common goal. Sometimes they share common distressors. So, of course, children benefit from groups that have high self-esteem. They're less likely to be depressed, but are more pro-social. However, we also notice that groups that allow each other to have those moments and express themselves and say, look, I'm not feeling well today, and they're supportive, are also benefits of a good relationship and a healthy relationship. Yeah. But there's co-rumination. You ever notice how cutting is a friendship curse? I have yet to have a kid, and I can't even count the number. I have yet to have a kid come into counseling with me who says, I just decided to cut because it's always somebody told me, somebody showed me. It's not something that's organic. These are the risks of friendship. You also learn risky behavior. Before it was substances, it's still substances, but now it's forms of self-mutilation. It's forms of self-injurious behavior, as well as manipulative behavior. Cliques are small groups of children, adolescents, that are friends that share similar attitudes, gender, race, ethnic background, and age. Crowds are larger mixed intersex groups, intergender groups. Yeah, eating disorders are introduced by friends. You also learn, yes, proper ways how to facilitate an eating disorder, proper ways on how to facilitate drinking disorders, rectal and vaginal drinking, intoxication rather, are largely introduced into social groups through a friend or to a person through a friend. So children of parents who are authoritative during crowds endorsing adult behavioral standards, whereas children of parents who are neglectful or permissive during crowds, usually disavowing these standards, are more adolescent and juvenile. Dominance. There's always a queen bee and a king in a group. There's certain people who have a certain charisma, girls and boys, fluid, all the same. There's always that one person that has a quality that can navigate a group, that is the glue of a group. But peer pressure, most powerful when you're young and socially anxious. But now we're seeing a shift. It's also very powerful when you are navigating social friendships online. No, well, that's good. But behavioral standards can be very fluid. What's good for one group, maybe it falls into another group, and now, well, maybe I do like this. It's all about acceptance, both positive and negative attributes. So popularity. Most like classmate, the popular kid is seen as both aesthetically and intimately pleasing. But yet there's the rejected kid, the outcast, aggressive or withdrawn, the controversial student or kid, the one who may be smoking or always in trouble. The average kid is there, is just there. Not causing any issues, is the miscongeniality of everything. And then the neglected. This is the most dangerous on the spectrum of popularity and rejected. It's not even the rejected, it's the neglected. This is where you see that now. It's no longer in school. And because it's now on social media, the age for where you can feel popularity and rejection has now been expanded from high school to lifetime. You have 60-year-olds who are looking for attention. Nothing against somebody who's 60, but if you are acting and looking for likes and favoritism and attention, this is what was contained in high school. Now it's everywhere. And it's the neglected person that is most concerning for people in my field, because they're the people who will say, well, nobody noticed me, even though the average kid is just there, and the rejected kid and the controversial kid, the neglected kid doesn't even have a presence. So they say, well, since I'm not here, nobody will know what I'm doing. So compared to popular children versus those rejected children. Popular children can be belligerent, combative, intimidating, and aggressive during interpersonal conflicts, inconsistently disciplined, not loving, ultimately have children who imitate the above behaviors. So popular children's parents. You ever meet a really popular kid and you see their parent and they're popular, but not in a nice way? Jeez. Yeah. And I bet you if they find that kid, and Brittany said, yeah. I bet you if they find that kid, the kid will say, oh, well, I really didn't mean it. Guess what? Do you know what that kid just did? Their kid, what was it, 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago. So 2 years ago, there was a string of kids who decided to bully other students. Yeah. So not only was Massachusetts not standing for it, the FBI wasn't standing for it. So if you bully someone online, you do realize that those www or HTTP stands for World Wide Web. So now it pings from one stream, from one video, from one cell tower to another. And if the cell tower hits London, which it generally does, www World Wide Web, it's a federal crime, it's a felony. So now anyone who does that, and it's on social media, so guess what? Even if you take it off, it's still there. That's the part that makes me laugh. You're going to jail and you're going to prison. 3 kids they are in prison. One got 10 years, the other 2 got 3. And this poor kid, yeah. Terrible, terrible. And when parents say, oh, she's just being a kid. No, your kid is just being a sociopath. If you have enough guts to bully somebody online, go to their door and say that to their face and hope that they don't hurt you in person. So I am a big advocate of, you know what, if you are brave enough to say it online, then you should be brave enough to say it in person. The same kids were contacting, it was a halfway house, and they were able to have it was like a halfway partial house. One of the kids was contacting halfway house. They were able to have contact with, they were pinging. These were like non-aggressive felonies, whatever. But they were contacting halfway houses and actually trying to provoke people who just got out of jail, either for substance use or theft or grand larceny over $500. What do you think happened when the court case, part of the court case, they said that they could do, upon release, they could do community service with the same people they were harassing? How do you think that went over? It didn't. It didn't go over very well. No, they, upon release, this is after the 10 years. So they still had to serve 10 years because it's a felony. Oh, no, it's not a good idea. No, it's a suggestion. They said, how would you like to also, as a part of your probation, they were scheduling because they wanted to see if they were going to do at the same facility. These people are not going to be there. So this is a kid that was 12 years old. Upon release, if he does a full 10 years, he's going to be 22. All for threatening. He sent very wild posts threatening to not just bully. He didn't just bully students. He also threatened, he had a bomb scare. So he threatened to blow up one of the schools. When they interviewed the parents, the father was also very aggressive. Modeling. Yeah. That's why the FBI came in. It's difficult. When you have aggressive children, they have lots of victims. We start to see kids who start to exhibit antisocial behaviors, issues with bullying, issues with their own self-esteem, but taking it out on people in school, disliking school, anxiety, depression, but maybe the symptoms that come out are aggressive behaviors. The problem with schools and doing enough, I think and I spoke about this in all classes, it's the fact that if it's online, it's out of their scope. That's why you have agencies now like the FBI and Homeland Security and NSA stepping in. And you're right, Katrina, it is domestic terrorism. That's why the FBI stepped in, the local FBI office. Because once the alphabet societies get involved, there really isn't any negotiating. Everything is a felony. So this is 2019 data. And I did include new data from Pew Research regarding social media for this year. So typically high school graduates have watched 2 years worth of TV in 20,000 hours. Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right, Brittany. And absolutely, Crystal. There are a lot of adults who are bullies. I mean, yeah. And there's so many different ways that people bully one another. I mean, I said earlier about even in counseling, I've seen, like I said, I have to decompress because sometimes things make you so mad. Sometimes the anti-bully becomes the bully, and then you go in and you're like, I'm stronger than you. And the power dynamic, people lack certain powers internally, and they try to make up for it externally. And I remember, Jacqueline, you told me about your daughter and how the school did nothing, and you watched the teachers standing there. And now people are more apt to videotape versus get help, which in some areas, great, but I don't want to see myself being on my feed if I need you to call the police or help. Now, when we talk about children and bullying and TV and what we see on TV, that's not even, that used to be the area where we'd say too much television and watching all these shows. Not really, not so much anymore. Children may learn gender stereotypes, aggressiveness, and impulsivity from TV, but television has actually been seen to be more of an inclusive platform in the recent 10 years, as well as with the lack of social integration of reciprocity, where you're watching and you're able to sit there and process versus react in live time. You're still seeing little evidence that television affects attention span, the concentration, passive and uncreative thinking. Yeah. So now we go to video games. We're just going down the list of what's hurting our kids. Boys play more than girls. Now, do you think the kids learn how to bully through video games? 13-year-old was murdered. Yeah, sure. They have, what is it, Grand Theft Auto? There's another game that it's so violent that they beat up. They actually pulled it off after Columbine. So that should tell you how old it is. They showed, it was part of a Sims, it was actually a spinoff of Sims where they showed kids a Lord of the Flies type of video game where the kids took charge, but they had to kill the adults to win points. So that didn't go very far. But people become more addicted. Grand Theft Auto, some of the points you have to roll over and beat up people. You have to show bravado. We have games that are simulations of military games. You have to show a level of strength and dominance. And even the way how kids engage now, it's more interactive. So you get bullied when you don't play video games very well. And of course, we come to the new champion of bullying platforms. If you want to bully somebody, this is where you go. Yeah, voice chat is rough on video games. Have you ever played with someone from overseas in the middle of the night? I did out of an experiment to understand what a group of kids I was teaching were talking about. I will not do that again. I will not. You now have moderators on certain sites like Discord. You have plenty of social media platforms. Why would I not do that again? Well, I did it first to understand it was part of just training. It was part of it, not so much, it was more than the continuing education, but I wanted to understand the level of addiction. And instead of just reading about it, I said, you know what, let me experience what they're going through. So I did it one night. It was actually 3 of my colleagues. We did it and we're like, we can't, this is insane. So Discord is one of it's not new, but it definitely, to me, it seems more all inclusive in terms of intensity. Hmm. Because of the level of, like you said, there's so many areas where you can build a new life. You can talk to people. People have met, dated, and gotten married off of Discord. People have gotten unsolicited and un and unattractive forms of therapy on Discord. Right, right. Discord is where a lot of people go to escape life. Hmm. So it is really tough, really, really tough for folks. So self-disclosure promotes high quality friendships according to the textbook. How true do you think this comment is? This to me is right up there with the European and Asian cultures primarily forbid forms of physical punishment. Right. So this is the new data according to a peer research study. This is in 2021, so they're taking into account all of last year. Even though we are using YouTube and Facebook more and more, we're seeing a rise, of course, in Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, which is interesting because when people think of social media, they don't necessarily equate LinkedIn. But because it's more for workplace professional, but it's interesting that these are the numbers. I would think Instagram and TikTok would be higher up on this list. Facebook is for older people. That's why it's popular. Let's be honest. It's the every generation portal. Exactly. It is. It's the every generation portal. That's why it's so popular, because all ages use Facebook. When Facebook started off as a hotness rating tool, that's what Mark Zuckerberg created. Initially, it was a college girls of Harvard hotness rating tool. Then it went to only college students can connect from one college to another. And I'm so old, I remember using my Temple University email address. Yes. Hotness rating tool for college girls. Mm-hmm. I registered my college email, and then it opened up, I want to say around 2004, 5 or so, to everyone. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So when people say, oh, Facebook, people are judged, that's what it was meant for. Think about Mark Zuckerberg as a person. This is a person who struggles in general with social integration. He created this. I know people have seen The Social Network, but he created this site for, if you haven't, I haven't watched the movie, but I just research alone. He created this because he was trying to judge who's the hottest girl on campus, and it grew. I've never watched it. I will probably only watch it for therapeutic reasons or research reasons. And it's not, it's more because I've had to read so much about it. This is interesting how that's how it started, and it grew to this Goliath. Well, once again, like everything transforms, everything changes, you never know. So these are the demographics from the Pew Research study, and this information will be online, will be uploaded by 9 o'clock, or should I say 9:30 actually, regarding social media. This is January 2021 demographics. So Instagram, out of a survey, 52% of people of Hispanic culture, Black Americans 49%, White Americans 35%. WhatsApp 46% in Hispanic and 23%. 46% Hispanics are more likely to use WhatsApp than Black Americans at 23% and White Americans at 16%. Pinterest. Women use Pinterest more than men. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. If you are familiar with Pinterest, it has more of a feminine attraction because it's pictures, it's videos, it's recipes, it's little videos, it's decor ideas. It can be. If you want a recipe for anything, Pinterest. Yep. You can plan a wedding. If you are an artsy, crafty, but at the same time, you can find just about anything on Pinterest. And it's a great example of what happens when you keep going down the rabbit hole. Yes. So WhatsApp is a great application for international calls without charge. This is why it's becoming more and more popular. Katrina, you're right. Study guides, medical guides, hair stuff, DIY. Pinterest is the DIY destination. Mm-hmm. And next door is a community engagement site. Now, we haven't even brought up, because we're not talking about adults yet, we're talking about teenagers. So what happens when children start to look at social media and see all of the negatives in the world, right? So when you see things online and they look so real, start to wonder, gee, next door, Pinterest, WhatsApp, Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook. MySpace is still around. YouTube is number one. What's the guy, Joe or Fred? Who's the guy who's your friend? If you That's how you know you have no friends, apparently. Matt, there we go. Matt, and he's always, yeah, Matt. Kind of interesting. Hmm. Exactly. Yeah, it is. Hmm. So this is where prejudices and racism come to thrive. I don't know why the Pew Research did not include, but maybe it's not popular enough. But I feel that Discord, yep, Discord should be on this list. Yeah, remember profile coding on MySpace? I actually do. I do.
Because we all have to be
So
muted.
there's 5 perspectives of undifferentiated
I'm muted. I'm
stages
muted.
of
Look.
humanity. So let's go through each one. You have the undifferentiated, you have the social informational, the self-reflective, the third person, and the societal. I'm going to concentrate on societal because that's where every kid wants to belong to a certain degree. Hence why there's such a love of social media. It's very easy to fit in if somebody likes your post. You can be anything you want to be. If you have a negative view of something and you're cool enough, people will follow along. And next thing you know, your view is a way of thinking. Yeah, makes you feel more connected. You ever notice that there's that one person who makes a negative comment about everything? Everything. The sun is out. What's good about the sun? Oh my God, you look so great. Yeah, well, the background sucks. Just life stinks in general for them. They're never happy until somebody else feels as awful as they do. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they have to play it off with a passive aggressive text. Well, I was just kidding. I was just effing around. I was just doing this. I was just doing that. Mm-hmm. This is the person that you need to watch out for. Because if you feed into that negativity, their prejudices become your prejudices. So how do you reduce prejudice on here? Parents have a hard time fighting prejudices outside, but now you have to combat the whole world at the fingertips, right? You need to combat it every day, every way you can. Our kids hear so many negative things at volumes which we never had to endure. We didn't have to compete with this. We didn't have to listen to all of this. Yeah, we had things that were around. Even if you're 18, 19, you had social media, but not to this extent. It's difficult. Our young kids are faced with this all the time. It's so sad. So when we want to teach about prejudices and educating against them, you just have to be mindful. You just have to talk to them. Because if you don't, your kid will be that kid, be that miserable child. And next thing you know, they could slip up and say the wrong thing at the wrong time to the right person, and they can report them. And unfortunately, they could be in jail. And that's how we're going to end class. On that sad note. Any questions? I know, good heavens. Wow. Yep. I got to put it out there because you ever see a kid who's 7 years old be hauled up by the police? How was it, Lourdes? Wow. As it, I mean, I don't, I've been to Florida and every state has their own thing, but Florida seems to just have their, it's just interesting. I'm not saying kids can't be arrested at any age, but wow. He misbehaved and got taken away. What did he do that required handcuffs? Hmm. Whoa. Whoa. Yeah, that'll do it, all right. I mean, in his defense, let's be honest, Florida also has a high propensity of teachers that hit on their students. Was he defending himself? No. Hmm. Well, just when I thought it couldn't get any more interesting. Hit on was you saw there was the teacher who said that she can't go to jail because she's too attractive. She was from Florida. Hmm. Yeah, they had the teacher that was too attractive to go to jail. Um, what was it? Casey Anthony is from Florida. Not saying it's a bad state, but just very interesting. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So we have a quiz due at the end of the week. Um, and if you guys need any assistance, I'll see you next week, Wednesday at 5. But other than that, I'll see you at 6. Have a good night, everybody.